Right now, in a small municipality on Colombia's Caribbean coast, the sky is on fire. A column of flame tears upward from flat, unremarkable farmland, twisting into the humid tropical air like a detonation. From a distance, it looks exactly like a nuclear explosion. Residents of San Juan de Urabá stand frozen in the darkness. The ground beneath their feet is splitting open. Cracks race through asphalt, fracturing roads that existed without incident for decades. A massive fireball rises above the tree line, casting an orange glow across the rooftops of nearby homes. Smoke rolls outward in every direction, swallowing vegetation, dimming the twilight into something unrecognizable. But this is not a bomb, it is not a missile strike, and it is not a conventional volcano. What force beneath the earth could produce something that looks this catastrophic without a single drop of magma? Why is the ground cracking kilometers from the eruption site? And what happens if the pressure building underground has not yet finished releasing? What emerged from the Earth on the afternoon of February 25, 2026, was a mud volcano, not molten rock, not lava, not the deep mantle fury of a stratovolcano. This was something stranger, something most people have never heard of, a violent explosion of pressurized mud, water, and methane gas blasting upward from deep within the sedimentary layers beneath Colombia's northern lowlands. The eruption happened near the municipal water treatment plant. The aqueduct serving San Juan de Urabá sat within the blast radius. Columns of mud and fire shot vertically into the air, scorching everything in reach. But this was only the first warning. Vegetation surrounding the eruption site caught fire almost instantly. Dry season conditions, low soil moisture, high ambient heat turned the methane ignition into a spreading threat. Firefighters from the municipal station arrived to find a fire column unlike anything they had encountered. Roads connecting San Juan de Urabá to the nearby district of Siete Vueltas buckled and fractured. The access road to San Juanito Viejo was damaged beyond immediate use. Smoke and mud drifted across the landscape, reducing visibility to almost nothing. And then the animals began to die.
The Departmental Administrative Unit for Disaster Risk Management of Antioquia, known as DAGRAN, confirmed the eruption within hours. The National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, UNGRD, followed with its own statement. A security cordon was established around the blast zone. Police blocked traffic between San Juan and San Juanito, and emergency agencies sealed the perimeter. At least 3 homes, some reports indicate 4, were evacuated as a precaution. José Ignacio Díaz Salgado, the Secretary of Government of San Juan de Urabá, confirmed the evacuations and reported that the local fire department was working through the night. No human injuries had been recorded, but the situation was far from stable. Cattle were found dead in the affected zone. The full scope of livestock losses remained unknown through the night, obscured by poor visibility and unstable ground. According to local emergency reports, heavy machinery had been staged nearby, but conditions were too unstable to move in. The earth was still moving. No one could yet say whether this eruption was over. To understand what happened, you have to understand what a mud volcano actually is. The Colombian Geological Service, the SGC, issued a clarification almost immediately. Mud volcanoes, they stated, are structures fundamentally different from magmatic volcanoes. Their eruptions are vastly smaller in scale, but they are no less terrifying when they arrive without warning. A mud volcano forms when pressurized fluids, a slurry of water-saturated clay, fine sediment, and dissolved gases, find a pathway to the surface. The dominant gas is almost always methane. Buried organic matter, compressed under millions of years of sediment, decomposes through bacterial activity and thermal cracking, generating enormous volumes of methane at depth. That gas has to go somewhere. Think of it as a pressure cooker buried under kilometers of earth. The lid holds until it does not. When the gas finally breaches the surface, it can carry mud and rock upward with explosive force. If the methane encounters oxygen on the way out, it ignites. The result is a fireball, a mushroom-shaped cloud of smoke and debris, and a scene that looks indistinguishable from a bomb going off. But beneath that spectacle, no magma exists. The temperature of the expelled material is far cooler than lava. The danger comes not from heat, but from pressure, gas, and the sheer unpredictability of what happens next. What came next shocked even the scientists.
The ground did not stop cracking after the initial eruption. Residents reported fissures appearing in asphalt and soil kilometers from the blast site. This was not surface damage caused by the explosion itself. This was subsurface gas migration, methane forcing new pathways through weak points in the earth, pressurizing layers of soft sediment from below. When methane builds beneath clay and shale formations, it does not simply push upward in a single column. It spreads laterally, probing for weakness. It finds cracks in bedrock, gaps in compacted soil, zones of structural weakness buried deep beneath the surface. The road fractures seen in San Juan de Urabá were a symptom of a system still under pressure. The eruption had released some of that pressure, but not all of it. The SGC dispatched technicians to collect samples of mud and gas for chemical analysis, specifically to determine whether a deeper pressurized source exists beneath the site, and the signs were already spreading. This eruption did not occur in isolation. San Juan de Urabá sits within the Gulf of Urabá basin on the Caribbean coastal plain of northwestern Colombia. This region is part of the Sinú-San Jacinto fold belt, a geological formation that stretches from the Gulf of Urabá to the city of Barranquilla, running parallel to the Caribbean Sea. The Sinú belt is the product of tectonic collision. Since at least the early Cenozoic, and based on what we know of the region's geological record, possibly since the late Cretaceous, the Caribbean plate has been migrating northeast, grinding against the northwestern margin of the South American plate. The SGC has described the process of sediment burial and gas generation as spanning nearly 20 million years. This ongoing compression has deformed massive sequences of marine sediment, pelagic muds, hemipelagic clays, turbidite layers, folding and fracturing them into a landscape riddled with pressurized pockets of gas and fluid. Hundreds of mud volcanoes line this belt. The dome complex at Arboletes in Antioquia spans an estimated 8,000 meters in diameter. Others, like San Jose de las Platas and La Lorenza, have produced similar explosive eruptions in the past.
Research published in peer-reviewed journals has identified mud volcano detachment levels in this region, ranging from Middle Eocene to Late Miocene, sediments between roughly 5 and 45 million years old. These ancient deposits are now being expelled to the surface by forces that have been building since before humans walked the Earth. The Colombian Geological Service has stated plainly that such events are not unusual in this corridor. What is unusual is the timing and the proximity to critical infrastructure. What is unusual is the intensity. But the ground had one more secret. On the night of the eruption, one woman living near the Siete Vueltas road could not sleep. Based on accounts shared by residents with local media and emergency workers, the experience was the same across the affected zone. People who had lived quietly in their homes for years, enduring floods, power outages, and the slow decay of rural roads, found themselves facing something entirely outside their frame of reference. The sound came first. Residents described deep, percussive thud that rattled windows and shook walls. Then came the light, a pale orange glow rising above the tree line, growing brighter by the second, visible from neighboring communities. Children ran into yards and stood staring before parents pulled them back inside.
Within minutes, neighbors were pounding on doors, warning that the road was cracking, that everyone had to leave. It looked like someone had dropped a bomb, one resident told local media. A reaction echoed across social media posts from the area that night. Families walked in the dark toward evacuation points set up by authorities, the smell of gas and burnt vegetation hanging thick in the humid air. Behind them, the glow over the eruption site refused to fade. Not all experts agree on what comes next. The SGC has confirmed that the eruption was a gas-driven mud volcanic event, not a magmatic process. But within the scientific community, questions remain about the depth and extent of the pressurized system feeding this eruption. Some researchers believe the gas originates from shallow biogenic sources, bacterial decomposition of organic matter at relatively modest depths. Others point to deeper thermogenic origins, where temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Celsius crack ancient organic material into methane at depths of several kilometers. Carbon isotope analyses from other Colombian mud volcanoes in the Sinú belt have revealed a mixture of both signatures, which could imply that multiple source layers are feeding into the same conduit system simultaneously. The critical question is whether the February 25th eruption released enough pressure to stabilize the system, or whether it merely opened a new pathway for gas migration. The SGC's own statement was cautious. They are still determining whether a deeper pressurized source exists beneath the site. If it does, based on the behavior of similar systems in this region, further eruptions are not just possible, we can assume they are likely. And the worst may not have happened yet. The immediate threat extends far beyond the blast zone. The municipal aqueduct, San Juan de Urabá's primary water treatment facility, sits dangerously close to the eruption site. Given what is known about gas migration near active mud volcanoes, this proximity could imply a risk of methane contaminating groundwater and surface water sources. If gas were to migrate into the water supply, the entire town could lose access to safe drinking water for weeks or longer. The fire hazard compounds the problem. The eruption occurred during Colombia's dry season, when vegetation is parched and soil moisture is at its lowest. Methane ignition produced a vertical fire column that scorched nearby fields and trees. Firefighters intervened aggressively, but the risk of wildfire escalation remains as long as methane continues to seep from the ground. Road infrastructure damage has already severed key connections between communities. The fractured road to Siete Vueltas and the damaged access to San Juanito Viejo could leave rural families with limited access to emergency services and supply chains. If new fissures open, those fractures will spread. This is how cascading failure begins, not with one catastrophe, but with a sequence of small ones, each feeding the next. There is a broader context that makes this eruption more significant than a local emergency. Estimates vary, but researchers have cataloged between 1,000 and 2,000 mud volcanoes on land worldwide, with perhaps another 5,000 or more beneath the ocean's surface. Based on available data, approximately 60 to 65 of them erupt in any given year. Collectively, they are estimated to release more than 27 billion cubic meters of gas annually, the vast majority of it methane, a greenhouse gas roughly 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. More than 70% of that methane is released during short, violent eruptions, not during quiet seepage. And roughly 30% of those eruptions ignite, producing flames that can reach tens or even hundreds of meters in height. The fireball over San Juan de Urabá was not an anomaly. It was a statistical inevitability. Based on what we know about methane behavior in warming sedimentary environments, some researchers have raised the possibility that rising global temperatures could destabilize shallow gas hydrate deposits in these basins. This could imply a gradual increase in the frequency and intensity of mud volcanic eruptions worldwide. The data is incomplete. Most mud volcanoes on Earth have never been instrumented. What no one disputes is that these systems are poorly understood. The Colombian Geological Service has announced plans to implement a monitoring network to expand knowledge of mud volcano activity along the Caribbean coast. But as of tonight, that network does not yet exist.
The sensors have not been installed. The baselines have not been measured. What happened in San Juan de Urabá was not an earthquake. It was not a magmatic eruption. Given that no dedicated mud volcano monitoring network exists in this region, events like this one can arrive with virtually no instrumental warning. The standard seismic and volcanic networks were simply not designed to detect them. The residents who fled their homes in the dark are still waiting. The roads remain fractured, and the aqueduct remains at risk. The ground continues to emit gas, and the SGC continues to monitor. Authorities have warned that new pulses, further eruptions from the same system or from nearby vents, are possible at any time. The mud volcano does not operate on a human schedule. Tens of millions of years of tectonic compression, vast deposits of buried organic sediment, an invisible reservoir of methane pressing upward through kilometers of fractured clay and shale searching for the surface. It found it once on the afternoon of February 25th. It turned the sky to fire and split the roads apart. It killed livestock, threatened a town's water supply, and forced families to walk through smoke and darkness to safety. The pressure beneath San Juan de Urabá has been partially released, but no one, not the SGC, not Dagran, not the geologists collecting mud samples in the field, can say how much remains. No one can say where the next vent will open. And no one can say whether the next eruption will happen tomorrow, next month, or in the next 60 seconds.